Welcome to Language Surfers Podcast, a space with fresh waves for the mind, dedicated to create a platform where professionals from both language industry and academia can share their professional experiences, and where we also explore different career paths at different stages.
Hi everyone, this is a new episode of the Language Surfers podcast, and my guest for today is David Mendes da Silva. I'm really happy and honored to have him on the show. And before I start, I would like to introduce him. So David has a PhD in cell biology. He finished his PhD degree in 2010, but he has a very interesting professional trajectory. He changed several times his career and also the domain. So before we also start going into more details, I do want to share that David was an inspiration for me to create this podcast. He is a podcast host. He has his own podcast, which is called Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, for more than 5 years already. So thank you, David, for being such an inspiration for us and continue to create such a great content for us.
Well, thank you for having me, Anka, and I'm honored and touched to hear you say that I've been the inspiration to start the podcast. You'll know by now that doing a podcast is you don't really have an idea of who's listening, and when you hear someone say, by the way, you were the inspiration, your podcast was the inspiration for me to do this or to do that, it's it's very heartwarming, and it gives you this feeling of mission accomplished. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well. So going into your professional career, David, do you mind telling us where are you from, what have you studied, and why didn't you stay in the academia? Because you have a PhD in cell biology. Mm-hmm. Why this change? What challenged you, or what inspired you to move outside of academia?
Okay, so maybe to start, I moved quite a lot. Well, there's people who have moved more, but in my life as a kid, I was born in Belgium. Actually, our parents are Portuguese, but they were there before the change of regime in Portugal in 74, 75. And I was born there, and I grew up there until I was 8. And maybe that was the beginning of me having this pattern of moving around. But we came back to Portugal when I was 8, and I ended up studying there. Actually, was able to go at a certain moment to go to the French school there in Lisbon, because my French was I was kind of losing the French that I had learned as a kid. But going to this school made me, which was more demanding than the public school that I was at where we lived, was the turning point for me to solidify this interest I had for science and for this curiosity for understanding things, namely and specifically for understanding biology and how cells worked, how DNA worked. So that led me to do my bachelor's at the University of Lisbon in the Faculty of Sciences in microbiology and genetics. It was actually a 5-year degree, which now is equivalent to a master's, but it's called a licenciatura. It's a specific type of degree that I think does not exist anymore, or anyway, because there were the Barcelona agreements, I think, which kind of try to equalize the undergrad and then graduate degrees in Europe. So that was my first degree, microbiology and genetics. That's what I gravitated towards, through my interests, but also through the teachers that I had along the way. And then I didn't go straight away to graduate school. Actually, after I finished that degree, I worked. I had 2 years more or less of working. First, in something that feels completely unrelated, but it was a communication program where they needed graduates, young graduates, to talk with doctors about the introduction of generic drugs in Portugal. So this was quite some time ago, and this was a year where I learned a lot, where I went really outside of my comfort zone because I am not although I have a podcast, I'm not an extrovert, or at least I am not, mostly extroverted. And this was my first professional experience after graduate school. I wasn't ready to go to, well, at the time it would be a master's after those 5 years, and then whatever. I wasn't ready for that. And when that opportunity arose, something led me to accept it
Mm-hmm.
and have this almost year going around the country and meeting teams of doctors and dealing with their objections, etc., etc. So this was really atypical for me because I had always just studied, and it was the first big weird, let's say, turn that my career had. Was that work at Infarmed, which taught me a lot, and of uh, which learnings I still use and reap results today, given
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing with the podcast, for example.
Yeah, that's great.
Then, uh, after when that program ended after a year, a person who was in the management of the program was a teacher at a university in Lisbon. It was a private university, and it was specifically health science degrees that they were giving, that they were offering, and she needed lab assistants, so lab
Mm-hmm.
people teaching and evaluating lab in cell biology and in biochemistry. And that then I did a year of that, and that's when the idea of going back to going to graduate school appeared, because that was I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy explaining, I enjoying allowing or getting people to understand concepts. Um, and we'll talk about it, but translating has some of that. uh, but I really felt that I needed to, if I wanted to teach, like, to teach class like my boss was teaching,
Mm-hmm.
my the professor, I
Mm-hmm.
needed to go to graduate school and get a PhD. And that's when, in 2002, I decided to start looking what PhD programs were there in Portugal, and I got accepted into the CNC, so the Center for Neuroscience of the University of Coimbra, and then the rest is history. So I did the year of seminars that they have there. I think
Mm-hmm.
the model has changed, but it was a year of seminars, and then they told you, now choose a lab to do your project. It could be here or it can be abroad. And I ended up coming to Montreal to do the lab part of my PhD.
Yeah.
2010, I go back to Coimbra to defend, but already in 2010, I knew, and the reason you asked why I left academia, uh, I'm going to finish my sentence, which is I knew that I didn't want to go on and do postdoc, etc. Different
Mm-hmm.
reasons. One very important one, I had found my partner with whom I have now my two 9-year-old and 13-year-old sons. So I didn't want to start moving around, and she
Mm-hmm.
was well rooted here. She has her academic journey, and she has a nice, a very well established job, and solid and stable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to change that or challenge that, and that was one point. But the other point was that the end of the PhD was quite difficult. Some of it with no funding, and for different reasons, and a lot of them attributable to me being, not having made the most informed decisions along the way, or even when I
Mm-hmm.
chose where to do my PhD. But it meant that by the end, I had I had kind of a tough time finishing, and those last few months were really tough, and didn't give me the impetus to say, oh, I want to continue this.
Yeah.
um so that, with the fact that I was starting a family, and actually when I defended, our first son was born already. This meant that once I had my degree, I had to figure out on my own what to do, because
Mm-hmm.
there had been little or no information along the way in graduate school of non-academic career outcomes. You're in graduate school, and the outcome is you do a postdoc or two, and then eventually you become a professor. Of course, now after 5 years of interviewing people about their post PhD careers, and also talking about specialists who are studying this and who have stats on everything, now I know that actually the day I started my PhD, someone could have told me that only 15% of us in the cohort had a spot waiting for us as a tenure track professor at the end. And it's something that you learn later on.
Hmm.
And I actually learned it once I was outside and once I was actually starting Papa PhD and talking with people around.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit of a long arc like that, but yeah, that's why I left.
Yeah, but it's interesting to know, how people now get access to information, right? Because back then we didn't have as much access to information as they do now. They can make a more informed decision whether to enroll in a PhD or not, right?
That's the ideal, and that's what podcasts like Beyond the Thesis
Mm,
and other resources try to do. And
exactly.
I see that universities, departments here and there are starting to think about this, starting to
Hmm.
think about ways to do it internally. But it's a slow process, and I think there's still people out there who need resources outside the walls of their lab, like the podcast,
Hmm.
that can tell them these things and that can get them to start thinking in a different way about how they can take the reins of their career if they decide to not stay in academia. Because if you decide to stay, of course there's hurdles, there's challenges,
Yeah.
but the path is the structure of the path is well known. Then
Yeah.
of course the details of the path, you need to figure them out and negotiate them. But once you step out of the walls of university and you're talking to employers and saying, oh, I have a PhD in linguistics,
Hmm.
and I want to be but I'm really interested in what your company does. But as soon as you say I have a PhD in something, the person is like, but then why are you here? The PhD is not
Yeah.
required.
Yeah.
And a lot of us need to deal with that. And there's a way to deal with it, of course. But I think why the reason why I started the podcast, Beyond the Thesis, is because too many people are taken by surprise with these questions
Yeah.
and then are taking home the message, when an employment conversation, a job conversation doesn't work, they take it on themselves of, oh,
Yeah.
my profile is not good enough, I don't have the right skills. And I think some of it may be true. There may be some specific skills you need to build, but a
Hmm.
lot of it is how you present what you did and how you know the language of the person in front of you. And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, another type of translation, but we can
Exactly.
talk about that
Exactly.
eventually.
How you transfer your skills to the industry. So in your case,
Exactly.
basically, you had it clear that you didn't want to stay in the academia, and also your personal life helped you shape your professional career outside of academia. So when you had it clear you didn't want to stay in the academia, what was your next role? To which industry did you
That's a great
directed
question.
your efforts?
It's a great question, and the why it's a great question. It's because people have expectations
Mm-hmm.
and think, oh, I have this degree. It's going to be a passport that I can show, and it'll open doors.
Yeah.
The PhD doesn't open doors so easily outside of academia, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was start looking around in my network, and I started you start with concentric circles,
Mm-hmm.
friends, family, then colleagues, and so the first thing was through friends and family. I got a job tutoring, so tutoring in different sciences topics, so
Mm-hmm.
math, chemistry, etc., for people who needed to get some credits to reorient their academic path. For example, they wanted to go, they didn't have specific credits needed to go to nursing. And here in Canada, there now they changed names, but it was the school boards, and this school board hired people like me, people with higher education degrees, to tutor people in different subjects, so they could get the grades they needed in those subjects and then access the higher education courses that they wanted. So that was the first thing, which was almost a year, but it was not a full-time job. It was there, highs and lows in terms of how many people I was tutoring. So I kept looking. And the second concentric circle was going back to the lab where I had been here in Montreal, and asking, oh, this person is not here anymore. Where are they? Did they go to academia or somewhere else? And I found out that a few people who had been doing masters where I was doing my PhD were going to the same place, same agency, and it was something that I hadn't heard of, which was medical writing. And when you hear, okay, these two people from two different labs went to the same spot, this might be interesting. And then next step, you interview with those people. You ask them, hey, it's David. Remember, I was in this lab while you were doing your master's, and I heard that you are at this company. And languages and teaching has always been interesting to me, and this medical writing seems to be related. And then I had a couple of conversations, and one of the people said, sure, David, well, prepare a CV. I'll look at it, and if it's okay, I'll pass it on to HR. And then you'll, if they're interested in your profile, they'll interview you, and then we'll see how it goes from there. And that's exactly how I got my first actually full-time job position that then I kept for almost 5 years, first as a junior medical writer, and when I left, I was a senior medical writer at this company that still exists. It's called IC Axon.
And was it difficult to get from a PhD student to have a profession as a medical writer?
So it wasn't, and that's the reason, because I had this proof, of concept, or the social proof, that these two people who had done their masters, so not a PhD, but they had done their masters, and they were in this company. And then when I looked at this company, there were PhDs working in there. I ended up discovering that this company actually was regularly hiring PhDs or masters. It was actually it was the pool of candidates that they liked, because their clients were pharmas or medical devices companies, and the type of writing they needed was not academic, but it was not, it was not, it was still specialized, and it was in the sciences and in the life sciences. So what was really great about that experience is that throughout those 5 years, they kept training us. There was a great onboarding system, but they trained us on the style to use, on tools that were used within the company for referencing, etc. But it was a kind of a semi-academic type of writing, but with a very different style. You can't write as if you're writing for academics. You need to know the audience for whom you're writing, and then there's we were trained on how to write the right style for those types of audiences. But they did need people for whom all of the types of content, information that we were going to be writing about would be very simple to understand, and there wouldn't need to be time spent, breaking that ice, understanding, simple life sciences, biology, pharmacology, etc., concepts and information. So I was lucky in a way that in that search of concentric circles, in the second wave, let's say, I found this organization that was specifically looking for people with my profile.
Yeah, that's
then
great.
I just needed to then go and do the interview and do the writing tests and prove myself to get hired. That was all that was that. But I didn't have to explain why I did a PhD. They knew that, because they had been hiring people like that for a while.
Yeah, that's great to know that this type of companies do exist, right?
Yes, exactly, and they do,
That's great. That's great news for those who want to move outside the academia.
Yeah.
And after this journey of medical writer, then you again switched to the translation part. What's your
Exactly.
story with the translation with languages? What's the inspiration to move into this field?
So this is another interesting uh, you know arc, let's say, that arcs that crossed at that point. What happened was, my partner was pregnant with our second child, and she has a she has a very 9 to 5 type job,
Mm-hmm.
um very secure, and uh, we decided that with us the second child, it'd be good that one of us stayed at home. And of course, I said, well, I'll stay at home, but what to do? And what happens, one thing I didn't tell you about when I was in the French school in Lisbon was that at a certain point, in the 10th year or in the 11th year, there's a choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to more life sciences, chemistry. You can go to more hard sciences, math, physics, etc. You can go for like humanities, etc. And my two my two choices that I was indecisive upon was life sciences on one side, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the other side it was languages. I really loved German and English, and I was as good as in on one side as the other, and I could have gone both ways. But my parents, mostly my mom, because she would have liked. She ended up not finishing university when she got to Belgium, but she would have liked to be a biologist.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Do this. Go for the sciences. It's more difficult. You can't pick that up later. Languages, you can pick that up later." So I ended up following that push that they
Mm-hmm.
did, and going to sciences. But the languages thing was always around,
In the
always
background.
in the background. Exactly. That's actually why actually medical writing was kind of a bridge for me to get to translation, because English is not my first language, so I needed to prove that I was good at it to get into medical writing in Montreal, in a company like that. But it was a first step. Then what happened was, and it was really an alignment of planets or stars, or whatever you want to call it. But someone in our circles, a friend of ours, needed a translator. She got a new job at a company where she needed a translator because they weren't happy with the services that they were getting. And she knew that I was kind of looking at what am I, once I quit this job, what do I do? And she said, you could come, do you translate? First she asked me, do you translate at all? And I had done some little translation things here and there, even at the medical writing
Mm-hmm.
agency. Whenever there was anything related to translation or localization, I tried to get involved. And so that was that opportunity, which was it was actually a full-time freelance job, was the moment that I said, okay, here I am getting, after all these years of having chosen not to do languages, now I'm getting back to languages.
Yeah. So fast
And
forward, you're again into your own
exactly. And now
choice.
both arcs cross, right? I was doing translation for another type of agency that
Mm-hmm.
does continuing medical education. So I was still using my scientific and life sciences knowledge plus my languages knowledge, and I was marrying both to do what I've been doing until today. So
Wow,
that's the story.
that's such a nice history, because sometimes you hear that people have to leave one domain and move into the other, but in your case, they just merge together.
Exactly, and I couldn't have planned it like that. It just happened.
Yeah, and it was perfect, right?
Yeah, well, it was perfect. It was a learning curve
Yeah.
because here I had now a client, company. They actually had some demands in terms of how I how do you say, charge taxes, because when you start on your own here in Quebec, until you make a certain amount of money per year, you can skip charging clients for sales tax.
Okay.
But they said, okay, if you work for us, you need to start right away charging that tax. So I had to kind of fast track into that, and then also I wasn't used to being the only how do you say interlocuteur? How do you translate that? The only person, the only point of contact
Point of contact.
with a client. And whenever there was, some changes to be done, or their client did not like the way I had translated, there was a whole lot of little things that I had to learn how to deal with, and so there was a learning curve there. I also, after a couple of years, decided to do a certificate here at McGill University, because I felt some of the question the yeah, the questioning and the challenges that I was getting from this client. I felt that if I had like formal training, that would kind of preclude them from going on to these discussions. So I did a certificate, half time in half time in 2 years, instead of doing it in 1 year. And so I don't think I needed it to continue, but I learned a lot during that certificate. Also, it kind of grew my network in terms of the translation ecosystem here. And yeah, and then now I have clients that I like, that come back, projects also that I like, and I juggle different types of things: some medical writing, some translating, and luckily all with people that I appreciate and that I've met along the way. So it's I don't know how it is with you, but this is how I kind of built my freelancing ecosystem. It was really actually one of the people that I like working with the most is someone I met at that medical writing agency, and then they left this agency, and then I went on my own. And a few years later, said, "Hey, David, I started translating. I'm at this agency," and then now we've been working in projects like constantly over the years, and
So
yeah,
like
it's been
the power
organic
of
like that.
recommendation from your network, right?
Yeah, the power of recommendation, and also the power of um, keeping and entertaining your network and
Yeah.
having authentic relationships with people. This is
Yeah.
someone that I now consider my friend, and although of course we're professionally colleagues, of course I for me and Fiona, I'm talking about you if you're listening. It's someone I consider my friend, and we know, she knows what I'm capable to do. I like how she's an editor, I'm a writer, and it really clicks. And she's been on great projects so far, and anytime she feels I could be an asset, she reaches out. And like you said, the fact that she's referring me to her clients is a big plus to then get on those projects fairly easily.
Yeah, but also because you've demonstrated the value and your professional ethics and way of working. And why I especially admire of what you've just mentioned is that even though you already had a work as a translator, right, freelance collaborating, you still wanted to go one step ahead and do that certification, even though you maybe nobody required it. It was on
It
your
was
own decision.
self-motivated. Yeah,
Exactly. So that's something that I think that really speaks a lot about how to treat your professional career and yourself, because you were a freelancer, right? So you were doing it for yourself and for your clients to provide
sure.
an even better service. So I think that's something to really appreciate.
Exactly. Now, of course, I also could do it. Uh, what I recommend, if someone is listening and is thinking, "Oh, do I need, or my employer requires this or that?"
Yeah.
If you can get paid by your employer to get certifications, that's my recommendation, because it's, in my case, it was a lot of time. I split it in 2 years, but it was
Yeah.
also tuition. So you need to think, if, for example, people who want to become PMP, that's a lot. That's an investment.
Yeah.
Sometimes, depending on where you are in your career, you might be, or even MBA, you may be, you may be, how can I say, offered the opportunity to do these things through your employer, and then you save that money.
Yeah.
Um, and also, as a PhD, you don't always need new training to access a job. Uh, what I suggest is think about talking with people and asking them, people who are there, is this really necessary,
Yeah.
or can I access the job, proving, showing other things that I've done. But if you feel the need, and that's what I felt at the time, I felt I wanted to learn more about, about the nitty gritty of translation and the theory, etc. Then do it. And of course, if you can, and if you can do it without spending too much money, of course.
Yeah, I like that advice. I mean, it's take the moment to really understand whether you need it or not. Not don't do it just to collect another diploma and another
because
certificate.
because
If
that and thinking it's going to open doors just like that, you might be you might be in for a surprise.
yeah.
It's much better to get a foot in the door somewhere, and then once you're there, see what you need, what is required, and if it is required. Often, you'll see that as a PhD, you'll be able to get skills and solve problems in a way that's very um, differentiated from people who don't have such a degree, and then it'll be, how can I say, it'll substitute for a certificate or something
Mm-hmm.
that if you didn't have a PhD they might demand from you. So yeah, talking with people and asking them questions is always the best way to go. I don't know what's your experience in networking, but what has it been throughout the years? But for sure, for me, I can pinpoint moments, especially with in-person
Mm-hmm.
events, like pivotal moments in my career or in the life of the podcast, that have only to do with meeting people, hearing a problem they have,
Mm-hmm.
offering to talk about it, or just saying, "Hey, I really like what you do," and just saying hi, and then something grows from there, and then eventually they think of you and say, "Hey, David, by the way, there's this project, or there's this job," and I thought of you, and it's only through the power of talking with people
Yeah.
with authenticity and with waiting for nothing in return, just with
Mm-hmm.
pure and authentic interest.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm quite new to the networking part, I would say. I'm also an introvert person, but as you say, maybe this is a positive aspect of introverts, like you really want to focus on authentic relationships, not just go out there and, pride yourself or sell your services or whatever. So I think it's a really great advice that regardless whether you are extrovert or introvert, do get in touch
Mhm.
with people from your field or even from other fields,
Yeah,
because sometimes you meet a person and that person cannot help you at a particular moment, but they then know someone, so in the end it's a connection between
exactly.
more and more people, right? So
Yeah,
you never
and
know.
and the trick, I think there's a superpower of introverts, which is we're really good listeners. And that's for me, I say it's a superpower because it works really well for first meetings. If you want
Mm-hmm.
to know about someone and you're curious, all you have to do is you have to do that first thing of asking them for 15 minutes. But then if you've done the homework and you have some questions, you ask your question, and then they'll be telling you the story, and you
Yeah.
just need to listen, and then ask your next question, and then say thank you. It's not that challenging for an introvert, and I think it's something we're good at, and people who are more extroverted will appreciate, oh, they're really interested in my story. But then, of course, that's the first interaction. Eventually, it's a back and forth, and then you
Yeah.
also learn
Yeah.
to how to talk about your stuff without feeling too
Exactly.
shy, or too much of imposter syndrome, which is often an issue too.
Yeah. Exactly. And from what you've shared so far about your professional career, what how do you think that you were able to develop or the flexibility and the resilience? um, was it something that, I don't know, did you have any role models that could inspire you, or was it just taking life day by day and see, okay, now I'm in this position, what can I do?
Mhm.
How would you reflect on that?
That's a very interesting question, and Let me reflect a second. Um, yeah, I think because like you said, I had so many twists and turns along the way. They don't, twists and turns don't get me afraid anymore. That's one thing. But I need to credit my partner and our relationship in the solidity of what we have and the
Mm-hmm.
comfort that we have in that too. So I can't tell you, oh yeah, it's because I'm super resilient. And no, I am also, and I'm saying this because I know some people are alone. They're not in a family yet. When you're in a couple, there's kind of a dynamic, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a safety net that's there. And I need, and I want to credit that for the role that it's played in me being able to take these chances.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I what I want to share is, once you've studied these many years to get a skill like yours, like mine, up to the PhD, you have developed a lot of strength of mind. And you've mentioned it. It translates into resilience. It
Mm-hmm.
translates into capacity to set yourself out to learn something new. It translates into no fear of the unknown in terms of a new domain or a new
Mm-hmm.
subject that you need to broach, because that's what we did through all these years of
Yeah.
degree. And we were expected to find out something new and write about it and even publish it, etc., etc. So I think that, apart from, again, like I said, kind of the privilege that I have of maybe a situation where I could allow myself some risk because of my family situation,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's there's also the fact that I've done so many different things that I'm not I don't have a paralyzing fear of trying something new. I'm not saying it's easy, and
Mm-hmm.
but also, okay, the second thing is that I need to credit also is, like I said, what did I mention of in any pivoting moment? Maybe I didn't mention it in the first job that I had, but it's my network. I have somehow, even though being introverted, I've had somehow the reflex of looking around my network. My first job, it was the professor that I had finished my final project knew the person who needed these students, and said, "Oh, she's interviewing people for this generic drug program." And I said, "Well, that's not something I had envisioned, but the universe is inviting me. Let's go."
Yeah.
Then that program ended, but this professor liked the way I worked, and she said, "Oh, I need a teacher for this lab." And I said yes. Oh, even though it's not something I had done. Uh, then for the PhD programs, it wasn't exactly, I needed to look for that, and that was standard. I need to look for the PhD program, interview, get into a program that happened, and then look for labs. But then when I looked for a job, once I knew I didn't want to go into academia, I mentioned network. First job, it was close network. Second job, it was a little bit wider network. And
Mm-hmm.
then the freelance, it was again back to closer network. So the key is, don't don't I was going to say it negatively, but let me try to find a positive way of forming this sentence or this advice, which is, always be thankful for the people around you,
Yeah.
and always um always be tending to this garden of people, of this network. Always be watering these
Mm-hmm.
flowers that are around you, and trying to see, oh, who's a little bit farther away that I don't know, that might be interesting to know, and not, oh, that I want a job from. That's not
Yeah.
a good way to go. It's, oh, that's interesting, I hadn't thought about it. Allow yourself to say, I want to I want to hear about how they did it. And yeah, even if you don't have, if you're not in that step of your life where there's support that allows you to take some risk, if you start to build this network of people who appreciate you personally and professionally and intellectually, things will happen, doors will open. So I don't know if that really answers your question in a way that you expected or uh like, but this is what it
Yeah,
elicited from me.
I really liked how you highlighted things, and especially putting into perspective the fact that it's very important to nurture the relationship. And sometimes it's not so much about how many people you know, but taking care and being grateful, as you well said, for the person that get into your way.
Yeah, and
I
respect
like
respect them also, because sometimes
exactly,
these people don't have time, and you need to respect that. And
exactly,
if you respect that, you'll receive respect from them later on. So it's a two-way street.
exactly. Yeah, I like that. And going back to your professional career and
Hmm.
your how it was shaped, right,
Hmm.
by moving to another country, by having a family, what do you think are your core values throughout your life in general,
Hmm.
as a professional, at the personal level? How would you define yourself? What are your core values, and what
Hmm.
impact do you think they had in your turning moments?
That's a very deep question. And yeah, it's something that let's say I'm still working on some aspects of how to answer that question, because up till not so long ago, I had a lot of imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know about you, but I anyway, for example, I just discovered after my two kids being diagnosed that I have ADHD. That's, recently, a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got me to think about a lot of things, even in my childhood. My dad not really understanding why I did things a certain way, and maybe telling that, making me believe that I was lazy or something, when it was actually the way my brain worked was not the way that he was he was used to. And um and so I'm really at a moment now, having learned this, of rethinking how I look at myself. And so this question of values is tough, but truth, is I think the foundation of everything. So in your relationship, of course, with yourself, but when you're working with clients, and in our domain, we work often with multiple clients,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the truth, say being truthful about, oh, I had, for example, I had proposed this deadline, but this chapter is really dense, and I need to know whether it's possible to push it by a day, by 2 days, whatever. Being truthful is, again, kind of like we were talking about for networking. It's kind of the foundation of healthy relationships with
Relationships.
clients and returning relationships. If you lie, if you hide,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it will erode the relationship, and then it will jeopardize it, and then eventually the relationship disappears because there's a breach of trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's too wide of a value for you. So, but truth. Um, the other one is, um, so it's funny because I was talking about timelines. The other one is respect
Mm-hmm.
for be it for the time of someone who you're interviewing as a podcaster, for the time of someone, an expert you're consulting for something, or for the time of your client who has timelines and who have their own clients. In my
Exactly.
case, often that is the case. So often, what happens is that if there is um, uh, more workload in a week, well, I will just work more to make sure to not miss any timelines. Then if there are clients that are more, that that you're closer with, that you can negotiate a little bit with. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
go to them and say, hey, let's, for example, this Fiona, my editor I work with. Fiona, I got this big project. Can we, can we push this thing that I had said was going to be for Friday? Can we push it to Monday, et cetera, et cetera? So respect in that sense, and respect in the sense of, if you say, if you mm, offer, or if you give a deadline or an expected outcome, respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, because again, it's the same way with truth and untruth. It can break trust, and once you break trust, you lose a client, and then you're back to scratch trying to build your portfolio of clients.
Yeah.
um there's another aspect. Maybe you're not going to expect this one, and it's like the mirror image of this respect, because it's respect for you.
Yeah. I like it.
When we are in graduate school, we do not, at least in my experience and the experience of most of the guests that I've had on the show, we learn that our time is not valuable, because we're asked to spend more time at the lab, to not have a personal life often, and but it doesn't translate into more pay.
Hmm.
Once you are in the job market, you need to, and someone is asking you, how much is your service? uh, you need to think before answering, and try and just looking around in the market and finding a number that you think, oh, maybe they'll accept this. You need to think, am I respecting myself when offering this price, or this hourly rate? And that is, I don't know what your experience has been about that, if you had conversations about that. But a lot of us, when we come out, we struggle with that. We
Yeah.
don't know how to negotiate, we don't know, and we end up hitting a low numbers. And then if you start low, well, then your growth, instead of your growth curve being like this, it's going to be lower, because you started lower. You're always going to be playing catch up, and that's something that's taken time to learn. So be be proud of saying, look, I have all this training, these studies, and this capacity. I am asking for this price. I cannot do the low. I'm not. If I'm, let's say, translation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a generalist translator, so I cannot do those rates. I need to pay my bills. I guarantee this level of quality, and I'd love if we could work at this rate. And then, of course, there's a dance, right? There's a negotiation there. Um, yeah. So there was something else that was coming, that I wanted to say right after that, and now it just escaped my mind.
But I'm really glad that you touched on this subject
Yeah, go ahead.
of setting rates, and how you set them, because I feel like this is a taboo in our industry, especially in
It
the
is a
translation
taboo.
industry. And when recent graduates finish and they want to start their freelance career, it's like they don't know where to start from, and then the more senior one complain that they are bringing the rates down. But in the end, it's
Exactly.
because there's not an open and honest conversation about, hey, what should we charge, so that we are all
Mhm.
aligned, right?
Yeah.
And I also feel like, as you well say, and that's why I asked the question about the values, because I think that when you're honest with yourself, and then you go back to your values and you align your values with what you're going to do professionally, that's where you are able to beat your imposter syndrome and say, hey, I'm new in this industry, okay, but I do have this qualification, I do have these trainings, I do have people around me that can support me if I have a doubt, because in the end you were studying with other people.
Yeah.
So I think that if you align your core values and you stay true to yourself, you are able to also match even from the beginning and put yourself in the market in the right place.
Yeah. No, sure. I totally agree with you. And actually, one of the things, if you're able to be in tune with yourself in that way,
Hmm.
that's a kind of a radar, like kind of a spider sense that you can use when interviewing for jobs. And you can see,
Exactly.
oh, okay, the culture in this place doesn't work for me. And then you just turn away and, wait for the next interview for the next employer. It's
Yeah.
very important, because if you end up working in an organization where the values are misaligned with you, you're in for at least a year of suffering before you
Yeah.
decide to start looking again.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. And And this again, it is always taboo talking about money. I'm
Mm.
glad you accepted my my
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it to the table.
my
Yeah.
bringing it up, because it is taboo. We often get reach, we get approached by agencies, and agencies, they're charging the high price to their final client, and they're
Mm-hmm.
guaranteeing them this and that, and then they give, of course you get a fraction of that.
Mm-hmm.
And once you say yes to that, you're in for at least a few months, maybe a year of that, and you're, yeah, there's a ceiling there of how much you can
Yeah.
make when
Yes.
you're working for an agency. The way I have gone, and again, and the way I've been lucky to to be allowed and able to go, is to develop a portfolio of direct clients. I have
Mm-hmm.
worked with
Mm-hmm.
agencies, and it's always been um and they've been great organizations, but the cost, the rate question has always been a tough one there.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the way I'm working now, I have projects that I like always, with clients that I like, that I respect, that respect me, and
Mm-hmm.
in always in timelines that I have some flexibility with. When you're working with an agency, of course, they give you a timeline, and then you're
Yeah.
like, you're in a crunch to do those things. That being said, like my first 5 years at ICXon, y- this doesn't mean that you should stay away from agencies. It's a great way to learn. If it's a good agency, they will onboard you. They'll
Mm-hmm.
teach you the ways of the trade. So again, I'm not dissing them altogether, but once you wake up one day and you say, if I went on my own, I could ask for more and keep more of this money, then
Mm-hmm.
try and do it, and then eventually transition, because it's very gratifying when you're able to do it.
Yeah. And as you say, you can select your clients, while
That's it. And your types of
in
projects,
other
etc.
scenarios you cannot do that. Yeah.
That's it.
Perfect. And now the one of the final questions,
Yes.
looking back at your professional history, would you do that again, or would you change something?
So there's two ways to look at that. There's the way, the real way. I
Mm-hmm.
love my life right now. I love my partner, my kids, and nothing, none, I would have none of that, or it would be completely different if I changed an element in the past.
Yeah.
The domino effect would make something completely different. And I really like what I'm doing. I like that I'm able also to, on the side, have this podcast project that is growing, and all of that comes from the journey I had. Now, let's talk the Marvel universe, multiverse type way. There are mistakes that I made. There are sufferings that I had, that I would maybe in a multiverse situation try to create a universe where I didn't have them. For
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
example, I came here for to do the practical, the lab part of my PhD on in a country that I was green. I didn't look for those informations, but in here in Canada, people take 5-6 years to do their PhD. I was coming with 3 years of money, and so knowing that, and if I had mentors at that time that because I'm a first generation university and graduate student, so I didn't have anyone in my family to open my eyes to certain things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have chosen the project that I chose from my professor, which was the riskiest one, had I had all of these things in mind. That's one big thing that I would have done different in this multiverse situation. Now, of course, it led to what it did, to the suffering that it did, but it also led to for example, me being here with you today, which
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be happening in another way. Let me see if there's something else that I could have. It's sometimes I entertain the idea of, oh, in another multiverse, in another universe, when my mom said no, do biology, I could have just stuck with my guns and said no, I'm going to do Germanics. And but that would have been a completely different life, right?
Yeah.
Because I would have gone to a different faculty, humanities, and done that, and I'd probably be, I don't know, teaching, maybe translating, but also teaching German and English and whatever. But that's really like we're in the sci-fi domain now. So let me see if there's something. Let me see. Give me. Can I take a few seconds to
Yes,
think
yes, of course, of
of
course, of
something
course.
less sci-fi to say? Um, yeah, it's tough because but well, I could have once once I defended, or once I was actually waiting to defend, because that's what happened. I waited for quite some time to get a date to go back to Portugal and defend.
Mm-hmm.
I could have. I wasn't going to say I should. I did what I did what came, and it was good, but I could have actually right away gone back to the lab and do that lab networking.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't ready to do it, and actually, I probably was at an emotional moment where I didn't really go want to go back to the lab anyway. I wanted to distance myself, and that's why I ended up doing that tutoring. But maybe, maybe if I had done that first, I could have started on the medical writing,
Mm-hmm.
language thing faster. Um, that could be one. One of the things that yeah, we didn't talk about the podcast, but it's not key to this, but
But it's part of your professional
it
trajectory
is
because you've been doing it for 5 years.
for
So
five
it's a
years, so
lot of time
it's part of
that,
it now.
yeah.
So, but what I was gonna say is, I learned the power of networking. You know, the power of networking and the importance of networking really during these 5 years of podcasts, and talking really with people and with specialists about it.
And
And
hearing so multiple histories, right? Because you
yeah,
can ask the same question, but the answer will always be different.
always be
There's a
different.
different
Exactly,
story to the same question, and that's something that I
precisely.
really like.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you do, and and I think people, and I think that's why I'm able and motivated to keep doing it
Mm,
year after year, is because each story is different. Each people
yeah.
had their different obstacles, different wins, different losses, and it's always interesting, and it's always useful to someone's out there
Mm-hmm.
who's going to identify with that story. But the second thing that I was going to say that I would change, knowing now what I do after all these years of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, is I would go back to me in year 1, year 2 of the PhD and say, start networking. It's really important. That would be the second main thing, because I was really, tunnel visioned into
Yeah.
my challenges that I was having. I was away from my country and most of my friends. Of course, then I developed my life here, but
Mm-hmm.
that it was, I did nothing. All the things that I am now really encouraging young researchers to do,
Yeah.
I didn't do most of them. And I would send a message back in time and say, here's what you'll know in 2024. There's all of these things, and do them, and at the end of your PhD, things are going to go much smoother.
Yeah.
That would be the second thing.
I
I think
absolutely
that's
agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
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 But again, I'm happy with where I am today, and all that I went through, and all, the good moments, the bad moments, are part of what brought me today. So my actual way of thinking and of living is more like that of, hey, that's how it went. I don't think too much about what could have been.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the right way to look at things, right?
Yeah,
Each mistake brings a learning,
definitely. That's
a lesson learned, right?
yeah. It's not a yeah. That's really important. And there's often, depending on the cultures, but mostly around the world, uh, there's this idea of, oh, if you have a mistake or a
Mm,
loss, it's you're
failure.
failing. It's
Mm,
failure. You're failing, and that's not a very constructive way of seeing things,
mm-hmm.
because it gives you very bad feelings. It can even preclude you from even envisioning yourself doing things, because if you start, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
failed once, failed twice, okay, now I'm not touching that anymore. And maybe that third time was going to be the charm where you were going to break some new ceiling or some new
Yeah.
into something new. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And it's something, yeah, it's, I guess it's not a value, but it's something that I firmly believe in and practice, which is okay, there's been this failure. I tried to be, again, going back to my values.
Mm.
Throughout this failure, I was tried to be as true as possible, as respectful as possible. Now let's see what I can learn from it so it doesn't happen the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I think that's the right mindset to have.
Mm.
Yeah. And I like to end the interviews in a positive. I mean, the entire interview was positive, but I do like to end it with the emotion of future. What are your
Mhm.
future plans? How do you
Mhm.
see your professional trajectory? Any changes? Any near
Actually,
future plans?
I'm working on that. So right now we were talking about, I don't look back and think, oh, what could have been. One
Hmm,
thing I do often is wake up and think, where can I go?
that's
and
great.
uh and right now, actually, you're going to see on LinkedIn soon some news and some new visuals on my profile. And the thing that I'm adding, and this is the first time, I haven't shared this with anyone on any media, is that I'm taking all these 5 years of Papa PhD, and I'm doing two things. I'm going to start writing a book about them,
Wow.
and I'm going to launch a community. It's going to be on a platform called School. And on
Mm-hmm.
that community, I will offer mentoring. Well, it's going to be a community where there's going to be a part of the community that's free or almost free, and where there'll be Q&As and they'll, coffee with me, etc. But for people who are on their first job, second job after the PhD, and feel that they're stuck and they haven't found a
Mm-hmm.
way to advocate for themselves and get to where they want, I'm going to launch a mentoring just for them. And that's really coming soon. So that's the next big thing. I'd love to keep on podcasting and even eventually, I don't know, have a podcast collaboration with in Portuguese, which is something I haven't done yet. I could, but it hasn't happened yet. But grow my podcasting in a uh,
Another
strategic way,
country.
let's say. Well, but yeah, so grow maybe into the Portuguese space, which I haven't tried yet, but make it more. It's been a passion project for most of these 5 years. I've started to monetize it. I'd like to make it more into a business,
Mm-hmm.
but that takes time. I think for now, the community and mentoring is going to be the next big change.
Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations. I really like your two plans. I mean, I'm going to buy the book definitely. And if you want me to join the community, definitely, I'll be more than happy. I think it perfectly aligns with what you say, staying true to yourself and to your projects and developing them. It's a passion project. You've spent so much time. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
finding a way to stretch
Well,
it is the right way to go. So congratulations.
thank you. I'm glad you like the
Yeah,
idea, and I'll sign you up for the first copy of the book too.
yeah,
But
definitely.
that's really just starting. It's a lot of content to go through. I'm working with someone using AI to go, mine mine the nuggets that are in these almost 300 episodes
Yeah.
up till now, and I'm aiming to have it somewhere in 2025 to have it published.
Wow.
I don't have a title placeholder yet, but yeah, I'm really happy for that. And you're gonna get one for sure. The community, as soon as it's ready, I'll invite you for sure.
Yeah, we're happy
Um,
that you do this. You're happy that you do it, but we are more than happy that you're doing this for us. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. And again, it took me 5 years to feel that I was at a moment where, okay, I know what I want to share with people. Let's
Mm,
bring them in a structured way. So yeah,
yeah,
it's really really soon. We'll see if it's going to be live when the episode comes out.
yeah. definitely. Looking forward to it. Yeah, I really like your plans. So wish you
Well,
all the
thank
good
you.
luck.
And thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for thinking about that because what I perceive from the outside is that through your podcast, you had the chance to meet so many people, know their stories, but now you don't, I mean, they are there. Anyone can see the episodes and look through them, but maybe having the information structured in an easy way, more accessible, a book. You can read it while you go on a plane, while you,
That's
I don't
it.
know, commute or whatever. And then building the community so that you have the live support, I think it's the best combination. So yeah, thank you so much for thinking about it. And I think we really need it.
Thank you. Thank you for your nice words and for your good wishes.
Yeah.
I really believe in this project, and yeah, and I'll take any positive energy that I can get. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Count on us there. Well, thank you so much, David, for accepting the invitation. I really enjoyed the conversation with you, learning from your professional life, personal life, how you switched countries and how they all fit in together, to say so. And especially for everything that you're doing, even for the translation industry, because I'm part of the translation industry. And it's very nice to see that people that studied cell biology are part of our colleagues, right?
Mhm.
So it's really interesting to have you as a colleague in our translation industry, and also super grateful for what you do with your podcast and your future plans. So thank you so
Well,
much.
Well, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your podcast project. This is a great adventure. I commend you for hopping onto this project. It's not easy to launch a podcast and to have it going and to have all these things in your agenda of interviewing people.
Yeah.
And it was a pleasure. You asked me great questions that made me think back into my
And think
very young
forward as
days,
well.
yeah, and think forward as well. So yeah, no, thank you for having me. It was really, really great. I hope your community is going to, the language surfers are gonna have some take home message they can take from this conversation. And yeah, and if they have any questions specifically for me, I can share with you. But
yeah, I think that would be great. Where can they find you if anyone wants
LinkedIn, if you look
Link-
David Mendes, Papa PhD on LinkedIn, you'll find me. If you go on papaphd.com, it's the website of Beyond the Thesis of the podcast. There's a contact page there where you can also leave a message there. But the best way, especially to talk about careers and things like that, is just through LinkedIn. I'm very responsive there, and it'll be a pleasure to answer any questions.
Perfect. We'll put that in the notes so that everyone has access. And thank you so much, David. It was really nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I invite you to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all other major platforms. Subscribe, but also share it with persons who might find it useful.